Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. It's the spring break, or very nearly the end of it actually, and we've got a lot to get through that's emerged over this unexpected gap in proceedings in the Formula One season. I'm your host, Jesse Billington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Thiemo Albers Daly. How are you, and how have you been passing the spring break?
Pretty good. It's both gone by rather quickly, and also it's been a nice break to have. I'm not saying I was bored of Formula One immediately because I don't think that's ever going to happen. If you can get through 2023, you can probably get through almost any season of Formula One. But it's not been as terrible a time as many maybe felt it would be. So it's been nice you've been able to just explore the racing series, go outside, have a social life. Magical things that don't happen the rest of the time when Formula One takes precedence as it rightfully does. How about you? How are you?
I've spent spring break very much sort of as Americans would define the term, by which I mean getting sunburned and drinking on most occasions. So yeah, pretty good. But also covering things like Goodwood members meeting, interviewing Jenson Button, bumping into Johnny Cecotto, former Formula One driver, also known for touring cars and motorcycle racing as well. Very interesting fellow. Couple of names from touring car racing as well. Steve Soper, John Cleland, chatting with them. A friend of the show, Alex Brundle, finally caught up with him because I haven't seen him since about September last year. It's sort of flown away. So it's been, yeah, good getting back onto the grounds of sort of pit lane reporting and reporting from inside the paddock, albeit the world of classic racing and motorsport. But no, it's been a nice break, an enjoyable break to have. There's been enough to keep me going. We've always had IndyCar as well, Palm Beach Grand Prix, which was
Mm.
fun. So yeah, it's been just a solid break. I don't think we needed it particularly after three races, but certainly there have been some elements that it's been useful to adjust after three
It, it's
races.
it's it's been very interesting when we look back at this calendar year in particular. You will have had these three races, obviously this big gap, then straight into two races, which are sprint weekends, and then they themselves have a sizable gap between the pair of them. Then you get into this really hectic summer period, and then you go off for a month, and then you have the nicely sort of
The well-spaced second
portioned
half.
out part of the season to finish things off, and you go, I'm not really sure what to make of all of that. It's been again, the summer is as intense as it always is, but it's not a
Well,
negative.
we think the second half of the season is going to be well portioned out. There is still
True.
rumour that it could be moving around. I don't know if you follow Kim Illman, the F1 photographer. He was checking with contacts and hotels and people on the ground in Saudi Arabia around the Jeddah circuit.
Hmm.
And there is speculation that we may move Abu Dhabi along a weekend and slot Saudi in just before Abu Dhabi, similar to how it used to run in like 2021 and the
My
like.
only hesitation with that is it's already a decidedly messy portion of the season as it is, without any modifications. Throwing another Grand Prix weekend in there is, oh, potentially, but luckily we don't have to deal with that until December, which is
November, December, yeah.
ridiculous when you think back to when we started watching Formula One and you were done sort of early November at the latest.
Yeah, you'd get to the end of October and that would probably be it. Maybe first weekend in November with the Brazilian Grand
Hmm.
Prix and it'll be done. So yes, we could be running on much like in
Winter
2021.
break might not happen this
Yeah,
year.
we much like 2021, we could be getting into sort of the second, almost third week of December and still have a Formula One championship rolling around. Meanwhile, IndyCar will have like finished for 3 months already by that point. But anyway, we'll get on to certainly the rules around Formula One in a minute, but we'll start with some of the bigger headline news of the spring break, and that is that GP Gianpiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's race engineer, will leave Red Bull. He will be joining McLaren from 2028, and importantly, he has been with Verstappen since he joined Red Bull in the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix. So GP had been with Red Bull prior to that, but obviously he's been Verstappen's race engineer since Verstappen moved up to the top team. And I feel like I mentioned this a while back in the fact that there'd sort of been these weird rumors circulating around who was leaving Red Bull, who wasn't. There's been this sort of drip, drip, drip of
We,
people
we, we
leaving.
talked about him thinking about leaving, but at that point it was very much just speculation and hearsay, and we wouldn't have been surprised if it had happened because that famous photo of the Red Bull key personnel has suddenly just had another person getting black and whited as they were faded out of the frame, and it was pretty much just him and Max left at that point, and we thought, well, there's no way he's going to go anywhere surely anytime soon unless Max does, and then lo and behold, we get proven wrong as is the nature of the podcast.
It's an odd one, and it hints at there being a possible conclusion on the horizon to Max Verstappen's Formula One days as well. He's spending more and more time looking at other options and reveling in GT racing. I don't know if we were on spring break when he got disqualified from the Nürburgring
No,
endurance
we
race.
just had that just before
Yeah,
spring break, and he's I think been and done one or two bits since then. You want
he
to lose this track.
he popped via Castellet to go and support Lance Stroll, who was going back to a bit of GT racing as well, which was interesting to see them sort of
Got
doing things.
135 seconds worth of penalties or something silly,
I
which
think it was
was
like
impressive.
150 for Lance's team, about 110 of which were from Lance himself. Um, but anyway, that's not what we're talking about. But it's the fact that Max is looking at these things outside of Formula One now, and that's often an interesting sign. It shows that eyes are elsewhere and the driver hasn't got their mind on one thing in full. GP's new role, however, when he arrives at McLaren, will be one supporting Andrea Stella at Woking, strengthening the outfit's race operations, especially with the world of Formula One getting increasingly complex. You've got multiple facets to the way that a weekend builds up, the way that even a session builds up. There's a lot to stay abreast of, and something that's useful having a top flight engineer on board for that. Lambiase becomes the third senior Red Bull figure to join McLaren. Rob Marshall joined as their chief designer at the start of 2024, while Will Courtney became their sporting director in January this year. So certainly on the sporting director side, GP will be joining a team that he's partly familiar with, and they'll be able to have this very open idea of how they want things to run and proceed. In similar staffing news, we mentioned it in the pre-record, Alan McNish joins Audi as their director of racing, cleverly spreading the workload of Mattia Binotto, who steps up to the top role at Audi following Johnny Wheatley's departure.
Yeah, it was interesting because GP obviously told Verstappen about McLaren's offer in a sort of "I'd like your blessing" kind of a way, and was told by Verstappen that it'd be silly not to take it. I think when we talked about the possibility of him before, he also, a bit like Wheatley, was thinking about leaving because he wanted to spend more time with his family. So maybe McLaren's deal had catered towards this, and it would be easy to see why Verstappen himself would support that. Um, More on Verstappen later, because obviously there's a bit more to delve into on his front. But I can't say I'm too surprised Red Bull are in this period of rebirth almost, rebuilding, re-establishing who they are, and they're clearing house one way or another. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think is leaving under a dark cloud of any kind. There's certainly no indication of that in comparison to other figures that have left in recent times. I think it's just one of those natural progressions we see, and it'll be interesting what happens with Red Bull after this. Uh,
Mm.
be it they successfully turn over a new leaf, as they appear to be working towards at the moment, or if this is another symptom of a larger cause, which who knows, maybe Red Bull, let's say here first and have something wacky to kick off the end of spring break with is Red Bull exiting the sport and being bought out by someone else. Who knows?
Being brought
If it
up.
was ever going to happen, this feels like the most natural time for it. If you're sort of getting rid of the old guard, as it were, you've got your main driver looking elsewhere, regardless of that being Formula One or other series, and your junior drivers are strong and stable enough to be attractive to any potential new teams, manufacturers, what have you, to come in. It's maybe not the most outlandish thing I've ever said.
Yeah, would Ford look to buy out the sort of project? Obviously, they're there as sort of a technical support element when it comes to the powertrains. Would they be looking to make sort of a full stake within the team? We'd have to wait and see. But I think clearing house is, I don't feel the correct phrase. This clearing house, this is if it was putting it in that sort of a analogy, this is more a case of the furniture's getting up and walking out. The house is clearing itself. But
Being redecorated.
yeah, there are some changes going on that are there's possibly an interior reason, there is possibly exterior reasons for some of these people departing, and it's six of one, half a dozen of the other,
But
and
again, we don't know what McLaren's offer was to the GP, so it could just be it's a really good offer. Red Bull go, you know what, fair enough. We
yeah,
would
we can't beat that.
we can't beat that for whatever reason. We won't have any bad blood about it.
And also, if GP is going there to sort of work in a role supporting Andrea Stella at race operations, he might not have to be at every race. And again, it
Well,
frowns
exactly,
at the
backs up
crux
the
of it.
family.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's possibly what the McLaren have been able to offer him and say, look, we've got the ability to sort of direct things remotely. We've seen Toto Wolff at Mercedes be able to do sort of
Hmm.
race weekends remotely. They've got the support in the team that functions without him. So we'll see how that pans out. More importantly, though, a series of meetings took place over the spring break. This is a section that I'm going to sort of flip-flop between sort of future tense, past tense, and present tense, because I sort of wrote these notes both prior to this meeting happening, during this meeting happening, and then when we finally got the results from it. So bear with me if this gets a bit jumbled. But there have been a series of meetings that have taken place over the spring break that investigated the current regulations and the shortcomings in their implementations. When I initially wrote this, I said don't expect major changes, but it'll be more a case of tweaks that allow for an easier flowing race, which is roughly what we've received. I predicted it will be focused on power unit operation with deployment and also recovery limits changing with respect to super clipping, which recovers at 250 kilowatts, with the next phase allowing up to 350. Nail on the head there. Um, but at the same time, that speculation of mine came around at a time when FIA had just started cracking down on power harvesting and deployment technique used by Mercedes and Red Bull in qualifying, which essentially is where they have sort of a MGUK disable button, which stops it butting in on the final part of a flying lap. Where if, say, at Suzuka, you've come out of that final chicane, you swing onto the start finish straight. If before you reach the finish line, the MGUK clip comes in to start super clipping, you can hit essentially a disable button, which keeps you at full throttle, full acceleration, as opposed to that sort of hindered acceleration, improving lap time. That shuts it down for 60 seconds. Um, and it's essentially a lockout system that you'd use for a cool lap or an in lap, and it's thus irrelevant to the performance lap. You don't lose out on power. You would only use it in the last sector of your lap. But it does have issues. It kicked in at very odd points for Kimi and Max in Japan, where they found themselves with very little power because the system had erroneously triggered, and it very much exaggerated the speed delta between them and other circulating cars. This was the problem we saw with Ollie Behrman and Franco Colapinto. Albon suffered it even worse when the entire system packed up and his car stopped on track in practice at the same weekend as well. So essentially, avoid super clipping gives teams a straight line speed edge, which certainly helps in qualifying at the very least. But in the race, the 50-50 split between petrol and electricity means that they'll be using regular super clipping to maintain pace. Then, on the 20th of April, we've got an answer on the main changes, most of which will be put in place by Miami, so the upcoming race this weekend. In qualifying, there are changes afoot to reduce excessive harvesting, encouraging more consistent flat out driving. So essentially, while they've investigated the Red Bull and Mercedes thing, what they're possibly looking at doing is finding a halfway house between what Mercedes and Red Bull are doing and what can possibly be implemented for everyone else to make it a more level field for qualifying. What it also means is that with the cars no longer having to clip as much, you will get a car that is able to push to its handling limits because you won't be approaching corners slower than previous. You'll be arriving at them, having to get on the brakes, having to get the car through the corner faster, and still having power when you come out of it. Where they've increased the recharge amount per lap or they've achieved this by reducing the recharge amount per lap from 8 megajoules to 7 megajoules, lowering the ceiling of recovery. So more of the lap is then at a push. So bad news if you've been hiding chassis flaws behind your electrical system, Red Bull. Um, and equally, there could be lower limits further still put in place thing with circuits that have got longer straights and fewer corners, think Monza and Baku, where deploying charge modes on straights results in these huge speed deltas arriving at cornering zones. And essentially, they're just trying to mitigate these sort of speed overlaps. Um, Again, the super clipping has been lifted to 350 kilowatts. Cars will now recover more when at max throttle, keeping the battery topped up more, so there's no longer the need to lift and coast into turns, which means that again, you're driving into turns at full throttle. You're driving into turns in a more aggressive manner and producing a more exciting lap, and also the ability to overtake more naturally. And boost mode will have a lower limit of 150 kilowatts or roughly 470 brake horsepower. So this is what the drivers refer to as the Mario Kart mushrooms, where you literally get on the button and you get your sort of extra kick. You'll get the full 350 kilowatts in acceleration zones where you deploy straight line mode, but elsewhere it'll be capped at 250 kilowatts. So essentially you have this sort of 100 kilowatt range in which you can deploy, essentially forcing cars a bit closer together, with the pace again, meaning you don't end up with that weird moment of Ollie Behrman hammering out of a corner and Franco Colapinto going, I got nothing. Um, there's also going to be a new start mechanism because, of course, we've seen the car sitting on the grid, revving for half an hour until they've built enough boost and charge. That's being brought in with essentially a system that'll detect low power cars, so cars that have not used the formation lap to build charge efficiently. This will allow them to use the MGUK system to get them up to speed with the field. So essentially, a different range of deployment than the cars are used to using, but essentially means they'll get off the line quicker. So no more hijinks of who was it who was slow getting away in Australia? Was it
So
Lawson? Yeah. So slow cars off the line will also have their rain light and side lights triggered as a visual warning as well. So it's less a case of sort of you arrive there and go, oh Jesus, again, Colapinto-esque. Why is it always him this season? And in wet weather conditions, they have raised the tire blanket temperatures for the intermediates, lowered the MGUK deployment, and improved the rear rain light. So there's been a lot of changes. A lot of it is very tech heavy, but the crux of it is we should see more aggressive qualifying laps, more naturally closer racing, and less moments where we have drivers approaching in a slower car because of that speed delta.
with the exception of possibly Aston Martin, but that's nothing to do with the regulations.
That's
I
just because the
do
bad car.
remember us talking in Australia about how Stella mentioned the possibility to increase up to 250 kilowatts at that point, and how I'd definitely be in favour of that because I thought, well, if we're already having this issue around what was it, turn 9, 10,
Yeah.
then we're clearly going to come into this elsewhere, and we were worried about the back straight in China as a principal example of it just sort of being dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum. We can't go any faster here. So I'm glad to see it coming so soon when to begin with it may not have happened until after the summer break. Thinking if we'd had Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, they might not have looked at it so closely and we would have had to wait for a sizable gap maybe after Miami heading into Canada, but then more likely the summer break. So benefits of spring break, I suppose. Not much to say on the rest really until we've seen it all in action. The theory again is good in the same way that the theory for the regulations before were good. We just didn't know what that would look like. Theory only takes you so far. You need to go and do it and find out and then hopefully tweak it accordingly. I suspect it won't be smooth sailing for everything, but again, I think there'll then be enough races between Miami and the summer break for I don't know, variety of circuits, variety of weather conditions as well. I'll be surprised if we don't have at least one wet race between now and then. It's sort of measure all of these things out accordingly. Interestingly, though, we're going to see all of this initially across two sprint weekends to begin with, before heading to Monaco, of all places. So that could be quite fascinating to see how that all unfolds. And Monaco, if it's even if it's dry, I was going to say, even if it's a little bit damp, but even if it's dry, the safety aspect alone will be very interesting to test there because if you don't get off the line well there, and if you're near the front, that's going to be Spa
Chaotic.
territory from many moons ago,
Yeah. Or Formula 2 from Monaco last year.
last year.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting we might get that before even turn one, which would be
Yes.
quite a record, which then I don't think could be beaten.
Yeah, I think that yeah, you're very limited the amount of track you cover before you have that accident. But I think overall, I think it's easy to detract from this by sort of going, oh look, they've already had to change the rules, but it's not uncommon for Formula One to have to change and update its technical
I, I,
regulations
I
several
I
times.
look at it in the same way that I looked at Extreme E when they first got going. They had this really harebrained idea that they somehow pulled off. And the first race weekend, you go, that was a lot of fun, but we are going to have to tweak some things. And so they tweaked them and they kept tweaking them until the end of the series. And you go, well, that's just a sign of not being ignorant and just going, well, I've had this perfect idea. There's no better idea available. Be damned what everyone else says. So I'm just going to plow ahead and do this. They've had the I could say the brains. It doesn't even seem like that much of brains. It's just common sense, I suppose, to go right. Okay, didn't all work out properly. Let's go and sort this. It's like the qualifying format from what was it, 2016, that we thought with Bernie we'll try this out. The timing session
Was that
one
the one where
where
nobody
it was
actually knew
horrible in
anything qualified?
Australia.
I thought that
Yeah,
was
and
like
then
2012
immediately
or something, because wasn't Alonso
it
in the
feels more recent than that. No?
the sure it was 2012 because I think Alonso was in a Ferrari and I remember Button being in a McLaren at that point.
We'll double check that for a later period, but either way, that lasted one race before it was immediately. binned off. And you can have examples of this where you go, okay, yeah, that's not quite worked out the way we wanted it to. That's all right. We can move on. And so even if these don't work out perfectly, it shows at least that they're willing to listen and make some tweaks accordingly.
What year did you say it was?
2016.
Nail on the head. It was the that was the elimination format, wasn't it? Where it was sort of a driver
Yes.
eliminated every 90 seconds. Yeah. Um,
And then it just bred confusion.
yeah, it only lasted for two Grand Prix and then they got rid of that. That was 2016. Good memory. But yeah,
Pretty face. Continue.
yeah, it's I think Formula One changing things as they go is not unheard of, and I think it's good that the series has had the gumption and the confidence in its own convictions to go, okay, this wasn't perfect. Let's make some changes. And again, we've got two sprint weekends, which on the face of it, everyone goes, oh, we're going to try and implement this as sprint weekends. No, we've got twice as many race starts. We've got twice as many active racing sessions to try
There
and
is
figure
that
out
benefit to
through.
it.
It's you sort of solve your problems twice as fast by doing twice as many races. So it's sort of six one half dozen the other. Yes, the sprint races could look a bit shonky because they often sometimes do. They're often a bit weird, but at the same time, it means we can tease out a lot of the problems before we get to another one of the Grand Prix. And again, we've got Miami, which a lot of people sort of don't really give two hoots about before we get to Canada, which is a brilliant circuit, often has very good racing to it. We'll
Many
have
hoots
had,
are given.
yeah, many hoots are given for that, by which point we'll have had a sprint race, a Grand Prix, and a sprint race before we get to the Canadian Grand Prix, and everyone goes, oh, we sort of figured it out by now, and it's good because the speed of learning in F1 is quick. Anyway, back to Max Verstappen. Having recently run in GTs at the Nürburgring, it seems more than ever his eyes are wandering from Formula One. With the news that GP will make the leap to McLaren in 2028, it draws into question how long Max will be staying at either Red Bull or, more broadly, in the sport. Max's current contract runs until the end of 2028, giving him a year potentially of running without GP in his ear. We're familiar with Max's contract, though, having performance clauses too. Equally, Norris and Piastri are only tied to McLaren to the end of 2027, so there's a chance that Max will follow his race engineer to Woking, though I can't see him fitting in there under Zak Brown. Ferrari might be on the cards too. There are rumours emerging that Hannah Schmitz, the Red Bull strategist, might make the move to the Scuderia. Lewis's contract with Maranello gets him to the end of 2027, and Leclerc's is at least that long too, but very much Ferrari's golden boy. He just sort of has to look a bit doe-eyed, and they give him another 2 years. Alonso's contract at Aston Martin wraps up at the end of this year, and unless they turn things around massively, it's hard to see him staying. But equally, it's hard to imagine Max moving there with it in its current state. And if Max leaves, who moves into his place? Do you leave Lindblad with another year of learning in the junior car and bring Lawson up? Do you look outside the existing Red Bull flotilla of drivers? He's very much a linchpin with how things could possibly happen across this year's
He was
season.
very Hamilton a couple of years ago in terms of once that pin goes, everything else is chaos. But in 2028, I could easily see Verstappen leaving entirely because he's already got nothing to prove. We talk about that so often. But I could also see him going to McLaren. I'd say more likely the former than the latter, just because he spent his entire career at Red Bull, and I'm not saying it would be unheard of to go somewhere else. I mean, you look at Lewis, for example, after Mercedes, you think, okay, McLaren, Mercedes, it's variations of the same thing. It's unheard of him to leave there. It's happened, but I don't know. It seems weird to imagine a Max Verstappen documentary where he has 2, 3 years at McLaren knock off in the end. It just seems odd. Also important to remember that you're saying about how he might not fit in under leadership at McLaren. 2028, both not a million miles away, but also a long time away. Zach Brown might not be there in 2028. A lot can happen between now and then. You never know. You look at Red Bull as the prime example. 5 years ago, would you have said some of the, oh, if you'd been told some of the things that would happen, would you go, interesting, believable, but I wouldn't put any money on it. You probably should have, because you'd be a rich man right now. Alonso, interestingly, has said that this season won't be his last. But again, that could easily change. He said he'll know it when he feels it. That feeling could change depending on how vibrationy the car
I
is
say
next
he
time he
can't feel
goes out and
anything. He's
drives it.
nerve damaged.
But there may also be that contributing factor. But by 2028, Aston Martin may have gathered themselves up and also look appealing for Verstappen. It's again a lot can happen in a short amount of time. Ferrari wise, I'd love to see Schmitz team up with either Hamilton or Leclerc just to see what that would look like. I'm just really up for that. So I hope that at least one of them stays for an extra year. If she then does go over there and make all that magic happen. If Verstappen does leave before 28, we've had this discussion before, I think, and I've definitely talked about other people, but I'd replace him with Lawson. It's just the most straightforward and easiest thing to do. Bring in a new junior to partner Lindblad at Racing Bulls. He's got a season under his belt at that point, so he's not the rookie anymore. He knows what's going on. And if for some reason you don't want to do that, I think you look to see if someone of the equal caliber of Sainz, Alonso, or even Gasly would be interested in coming over. Because of the current drivers on the grid, I don't think anyone else would work in there. Sainz depends on Williams. Alonso, man, just wants a car that can get on podiums, win races. If you can give him that, he doesn't really care how he gets it. Gasly, now that the old guard's gone, maybe he would fare better there. I can't see Piastri or Norris going to Red Bull. Again, it seems a bit weird in my mind in terms of trying to picture Verstappen in higher orange racing overall. It just doesn't sit right. So of the drivers on the grid, I can only see really those three if you're going to look outside of your own stable, because I just don't. It, weird things have happened in Formula One. I will admit that, but it just even by my and Eddie Jordan into the past kind of very left field sort of predictions, I don't think even he would necessarily go that far off the piste.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I could possibly see Norris making the move to Red Bull, possibly out of a desperation if he sort of lost out next year to Piastri in the championship, gets to the end of a contract or towards the end of a contract that he can buy himself out of, and goes to Red
It
Bull and
also relies on Red Bull having their collective shit together.
yeah, if they've got their ducks in a row and they've got something half decent worth driving, it's a place that drivers might want to look at. And again, I think Sainz would be an interesting one. Gasly would be an interesting one, but at the moment their Alpine's design team have built a half decent car, and Gasly understands how to get the pace out of it. You're not going to walk away when you're the team leading
Well,
driver
that's
in a
the
car that you
thing.
understand.
Would you be walking away or would you be told where the door is, depending on what the situation is with who else Flavio has his eye on and what his unrealistic expectations are for the team this week? It's not always the driver's choice to leave, and it wouldn't be the first time we see Alpine Renault make a questionable decision on the driver front.
True. Speaking of Alpine drivers, did you see Colapinto's show run in Buenos Aires?
I saw glimpses. I can't say I sat down to watch it.
I'm not saying you should have sat down to watch it. All I'm saying is, did you see the fact that the Alpine caught fire while it was there?
I did not, but that is on brand.
He did get to drive a Fangio Mercedes though while he was there, so he at least got to sort of
Hoping that
like
didn't catch fire more for the
that
sake of the
did not
car than
catch
anything
fire.
else.
No, no. But it was also because obviously his grandmother is too old to actually travel and see him race. It was nice for his grandmother to get the chance to see him in a Formula One car. So some positive Colapinto news. Um, Mind you, I've mentioned Gasly, someone whose hairline is often in the news. Good news for him. We're off to Turkey, 2027 through 2031 inclusive. We're back at Istanbul Park, and this won't be replacing any other circuits. It will simply be filling in gaps where others drop out, where we're seeing more and more circuits arriving with these sort of flip-flop on-off contracts. Turkey is basically going to be sort of filling in the gaps depending on where they appear in the calendar each year from 2027 through to 2031. Retaining a 24 race season essentially is the goal from here on out, and therefore its timing on the calendar each year is yet to be confirmed. But given that we pass by the area several times a year, it's well placed to drop in. It's a bit like Baku. You can either have it as you come out from the Far East and into Europe, or you can have it as you come back out from sort of the Americas towards the Middle East for your finale. You can have it going either way. It's a clever move, and it's a circuit that the drivers like. It's a circuit that's big enough, wide enough, and fast enough to be exciting for most forms of car, and has some very demanding corners to it. So by 2027 as well, we'll have all the racing sort of power deployment figured out. Spicy, hopefully.
Yeah, it's excellent news, though. I mean, it should never have got off the calendar in the first place. It's just such a good racetrack. I can't wait for more of it in the future. You think about some of the most memorable moments we've had there. I think Vettel and Webber coming together, Lance Stroll's somehow pole position, Hamilton in the same weekend getting his seventh driver's title. And those are just the bits that are immediately coming to mind before you
That
even delve into
incredible
the
save from
details
Max
of which there
Verstappen.
is. Well, yeah, exactly. The more you scratch beneath the surface, the more you will find, and it's just exceptional from start to finish. And I hope that we get at least one feeder series there at some point. I don't know which one. Again, depends on where in the year. You could have it
Formula,
in one year where it goes with Formula 2 after Baku, they go to Turkey or before
yeah,
Baku. If it's early in the year, Formula 3 could go there.
yeah.
F1 Academy doesn't really matter because they're kind of spread out regardless, so it works both ways for them. Um, just sign me up for all of it, please.
I mean, Formula Two in its old GP2 days used to be there because there was a great race
Well, yeah,
between
because it was
Lewis.
Lewis's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his championship winning race was in GP2 around Istanbul Park. So a lot to look forward to, and one that will certainly be going on my calendar to try and get to next year. I think we've got British Grand Prix this summer, great, and then we'll see what Turkey brings next year when they unveil the calendar and get booking
you can
fast.
chop some of that off your head and donate it to Gasly while you're over there.
We'll do some sort of like sponsorship deal, yeah, where I give him some hair and he can have like a nice sort of gingery brown sort of fringe, I suppose. Anyway, with the news out of the way, we'll obviously brush up on anything else as we get into Miami. We'll record that later this week. We figured we'd finally get around to something that we keep positing just out of sheer interest, which was the question of what if you added Formula One Academy into the 2025 constructors standings? This is the idea that obviously F1 teams all support a driver in Formula One Academy. They all earn points across their, what is it, 7 rounds, a sprint race and a main Grand Prix for each of the F1 right drivers there. What if you simply added those points to the teams? Do any of the teams move around? Do we get a different constructors order? Who's doing the heavy lifting for who? And there are some interesting bits and pieces here. So buckle up. This is about to get very fun. Bear in mind, the 2025 constructors finish order was McLaren in first, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, Williams, RB, Aston Martin, Haas, Sauber, Alpine. And then, once you add in the F1 Academy drivers, there are some interesting results. Alpine, unsurprisingly, enjoys a healthy bump in points. Nina Gademan's strong season, lifting them off the bottom and bringing them into a season-long battle with Williams, Sauber, and RB. However, the strong finish to the season by the trio cannot be beaten. Nina held back a little bit by the boys in the team. Gasly only scores 2 points after Belgium, famously, and Colapinto pointless all season, depending on how you interpret that. Nonetheless, Gademan's season is enough to elevate the French side over Haas, who benefit from just a 3 point assist from Courtney Crone. Sauber enjoy a 37-point lift from Emma Felbermeyer, and they find themselves in a season-long battle with RB, as mentioned. Eventually, Sauber coming out on top. Eventually Sauber coming out on top. Emma's race win really putting them ahead of RB on countback, if my maths is correct. They essentially tie on points, but I think because Felbermeyer stands atop the rostrum once, and obviously the closest RB get is third place with Isaac Hadjar. I think that's how it would work. Um, Courtesy of the earlier build-up of points as well from Emma's sprint race win in Canada, Sauber achieves their sort of mid-season bump in the standings around earlier as well. Conventionally, that bump doesn't arrive until Britain and Hulk's podium, but obviously with the increase in points brought by Emma Feldmeyer, they sort of shoot up the rankings a bit more. Once in seventh, the team stays there for several more rounds than they normally would do as well. They only float around for, I think it's 2 rounds if it's just the top team, but with the F1 Academy team, that extra trickle of points just keeps them competitive for that bit more of the season, giving us a bit more excitement, theoretically. Aston Martin benefit from the drip feeding of Houseman's points through the season, keeping them on Williams' tail, but the sprint race win from Leah Block slots in nicely with Carlos Sainz's late season form to pull Williams away from the chasing team from Silverstone.
We'll just interject here by the thought that you've just given me here, which is I don't know where, I don't know when or how, or any of those sort of important details, but you know how in endurance racing you will have different classes of car and category racing, but all at the same time you'll have the staggered starts. All four of them. That's, I don't know, Spa, say. But you need a big enough circuit. Spa,
Silverstone.
Kota,
They're all at Silverstone.
Silverstone, it would work. F1, F2, F3, F1 Academy. You've got what, 60, 70 cars on the grid at that point?
22 in F1.
22, 22 again, I
No, it's
think,
24, isn't it?
30,
24 in
24,
F2.
30, and then what, 18? You've got a
Fantastic.
sizable field. That would be just an interesting
Yeah, just
spectacle
north of
to see,
60.
especially the speed. potentially a bit too dangerous in points because we're already having trouble with qualifying to environment. I wouldn't like to see necessarily a F1 car come up to the back of an F1 Academy car. The speed difference if you don't get out of the way. That
Hmm.
could be a very freeze frame. You're probably wondering how I got here moment. Um, as you're yeeted through the air in a Roy Nissany Dennis Hauger style from back in what 22 or whenever it was.
Yeah, 22.
Um, but just while we're throwing in random things that aren't going to happen anytime soon, that's an interesting thought to have.
Multi-class open wheeler racing, F1, F2, F3, F1 Academy. So essentially F1 Academy is functioning in F4 series. You'd have
Yeah.
F1 through F4 all there in over 60 cars. Would be
That's what I'm
fun.
saying. This is what I'm saying.
You
You
can
need a
only
big
do it
circuit
for the
because if you're
sprint
going
race.
at like a Monza or something, that's not going to go well.
No,
It's just not a big enough track.
no, but if you go for Silverstone, it's big enough, wide enough, and the top speed sections are limited really to the Wellington Straight and the Hangar Straight. There's only two sections there, and they're well
The
sighted as
the
well.
S's could be a little bit hairy at
Yeah.
points, but
Having to make a sort of big send around the outside inside in an F1 car because you've got sort of the lipstick backed
we've got
F1
two
Academy
F1
cars
Academy
down the
drivers trying
inside.
to just battle with each other through there would be.
And it's also not
But
like in endurance racing where you can do the high beams flash to let the slower cars know you're coming because you don't have high beams in Formula One. Um,
although
they
that'd be a
keep
great excuse
refining.
to attach them to the vent just behind the driver's
Yeah,
head
well,
and
you've
just
got.
have a big searchlight.
Oh no, what they should do is sort of like the very, very old style sort of vintage sports cars. Is you have them sort of on the struts that go out to the sort of eye because we haven't got the eyebrows on the wheels anymore, have we? Or do we?
I'm gonna
Apparently.
say you could just have like the old car. They just pop up headlights in that
No,
way.
no, no,
Just as
not
soon as you
pop-up, just
come up.
like the little sort of pod ones, little 7 inch, just sort
Hmm.
of Lucas halogens, just sort of plonked on essentially the suspension crossbars. So obviously they wobble around a bit over the bumps and stuff, but you've got now the chance to sort of do the brights flash. Um,
Just for insult to injury, because it's a longer race, in theory, mandatory pit stops and driver swaps. So you
so
get your
to
reserve drivers in.
no, what you do is you cut back on the number of cars you need circulating because there is a cap you can have at Silverstone. I think it's about 60. So
We might be all right with that.
each team in Formula One, Formula Two, and Formula Three, where you have more than one driver per team, essentially, or per designated outfit, has to do the driver swap. So obviously, F1, you'd have Lewis and Charles swapping. In F2, you'd have sort of your teammates swapping there. That way, you'd
Yeah.
get through them. I think that would be a fun experiment, way beyond
It
the
certainly
means of some.
benefits some teams more than others.
Yeah,
We
ones where
signed
your
up. How
drivers at the
many
same
drivers?
height.
Oh dear, that's not
Yeah,
good.
especially ones where you've got to like get a seat in and out that's noticeably
Hmm.
different for a sprint race. But that's more than I can try and calculate with an Excel spreadsheet. Back to
There's
the.
another episode for summer break.
Ooh. Um, Meanwhile, Ferrari's dire opening weekends of 2025 are resurrected by Maya Vug, who's on a championship run chasing down Dorian Pau. Conventionally, Ferrari don't break into the top three until Spain, but with Maya's assistance, they come out of China a position ahead of where they should be, and Vog's 33 points addition in Saudi pushes Ferrari into the top three coming out of the Arabian Peninsula, dragging them comfortably clear of Red Bull. However, Russell and Pan's consistency in the points makes Mercedes tricky to catch. They tie after the Italian Grand Prix, Vog's strong showing in Zandvoort putting them in touching distance, while Leclerc piles on some strong points, but it's not enough to overhaul the Silver Arrows. Meanwhile, at Red Bull, Palmowski's consistent championship is helping make up for the lost points from Yuki. Over 10 fewer races, some of them only sprints, Alicia nearly triples Sonoda's point tally. Verstappen's redoubled efforts, combined with a podium finish to Alicia's season in Las Vegas, helped chase down Ferrari, bringing them to within 10 points of the Italian outfit. Mercedes and McLaren, though, is very much the championship battle this way round. They're still tied coming out of Australia, but Pound's bonus points in China help the Silver Arrows edge ahead. But it's not enough to compete with the consistency of the F1 points tally from McLaren, bolstered by a strong Ella Lloyd, who only misses out on points twice across the season, both from rare clumsy moments attributable to the Welsh driver. If you put their individual championships into F1, Verg would outscore Lewis by 1 point at season's end, finishing seventh with Dorian Pan sixth, just behind Charles Leclerc. Overall, Ferrari do well from this, their strong season for Vug, pulling them away from Red Bull. Aston Martin also move up one, their steady feed of occasional points from Houseman, shuffling them up in the order. Sauber do the best of anyone, seemingly leaping up 2 places to seventh, with RB unable to reply to any of the points collected by either squad on any regular basis. On the face of it, Alpine doing only 1 place better isn't great, but they are now in a regular battle with other teams for seventh, which, considering that they were sort of losing to
Nina
themselves for
Gaiman doing
10th.
an awful lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Give her a pay rise.
Go to Nina Gaidman. It's Haas who struggled the most, where other teams benefit from around 20 to 50 points in that field. They only gained 3, leaving them well behind. The overall finishing order, then, for clarity's sake, is by Abu Dhabi. McLaren still win. Mercedes are in second. Ferrari are now in third. Red Bull fourth. Williams hold on to fifth. Aston Martin now finish sixth. Sauber seventh. RB eighth. Alpine ninth, and Haas 10th. When you look at it over the points, it's a lot more drastic. McLaren 942 points. Then we get to Mercedes 641, Ferrari 555, Red Bull 545, and then we go to Williams 174, Aston Martin 139. Sauber and RB, like I said, tie on 107 apiece, but I think I offered it to Sauber because they had a win there. And then it's 96 points for Alpine, Haas on 82.
And of the 96 points that Alpine would get in that situation, how many belong to Gaydon?
How many belong to Gaidman? I can go and tell you that conventionally Alpine scored 22 points. So was that at 74? If my quick maths is correct and I'm remembering the two
Nina
numbers.
Gaydman, the GOAT, indeed.
Yeah. Actually, I should be able to tell you. Nina Gaidman, yeah, scores 74 points in that season. So, yeah. And again, bear in mind that, like I said, the F1 Academy that last season was 7 rounds with a sprint race and a Grand Prix in each of them. And obviously, they do get points for fastest
Everyone
lap
focuses
time.
on Dorian Panamaya Berg, but I think more attention for Nina Gaydman, quite frankly, if this is one of the situations you could put her in. That's
Yeah,
outstanding.
it's a really strong showing. Is she running this season? She is as well. And obviously, after a fairly strong start, she scored 10 points in the sprint race in China as well. So, yeah, it's not looking bad for her this season. So, could be one to watch, dare I say. But there we go. That rounds out our little thought piece. Unfortunately, we can't really do it with things like Formula 2 and Formula 3 because not every team backs an F2
It
or
would have to go
F1.
driver wise, and then it just gets unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah, who's in whose academy, who's linked to what, who's most senior out of it, because you can't have like all of the Red Bull drivers chipping in because they'd win by like the third round of the season or something stupid. Monaco, Red Bull already crowned constructors champion. Um, which would be kind of an interesting way of trying to figure it out. But again, something for a different Excel spreadsheet. Otherwise, that's enough to get us back up to speed going into Miami. We'll be back with a proper preview of the Miami Grand Prix, which is, of course, as I've already mentioned, a sprint weekend. We have F1 Academy there. Do we have any other feeder series? It's just F1 Academy.
No, we've just got Formula 2. I don't think F1 Academy's there this year.
Uh, I thought they are. Let's do a quick check. 2026 F1 Academy calendar.
They appear to be testing in Silverstone at the moment, so they really need to get a
Yeah,
move on if
yeah.
they are.
They are, no, I'm wrong. They're at Montreal. But we do have F2 there, and of course F2 joining us when we get to Canada as well for two first
Hmm.
times for the series, all poised to just purposefully stop Colton Herta doing the Indy 500. But anyway, that's what we've got coming up. We've still got what 21 rounds of the no 19 rounds of the Formula One season still to contest. Plenty to look forward to. In the meantime, Thiemo, where can people find more from you?
This week, if you want more from me, you can find it over on It's Race Week, where I've got a three-part interview out where I'm in conversation with Joanne Conte. So go and check that out.
Lovely stuff. And if you'd like more from me, you can pick up the latest issue of Classic Car Weekly. It's a bumper issue out on Wednesday this week covering Drive It Day. I've got a lovely piece where I compare 90 years of Morgan sports cars. And of course, you can find me just on the internet as at Jesse on Cars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I do have a video halfway through processing for TikTok. That'll hopefully be out soon, as well as my April in review video as well. So plenty still to come from me. And like I said, we'll be back in a few short days with a preview of the Miami Grand Prix.